You know, living in Somerville and Cambridge, I've seen your bikes going up and down, and there was always a question mark as to what their story was and what their purpose was. So it's wonderful to see this and understand the greater meaning and the impact that it's having. So if you can just give us an introduction of, Bob, why you thought this was a great story, and Wenzday, why this was your passion.
Yeah, oh, that's fine. We can share.
Oh,
Yeah. Okay, I'll go first. So, thank you all for coming to see our film. And my name is Wenzday, and we started Metro Pedal Power back in 2007 or so. I was really passionate about bikes and the efficiency of the bicycle in a city versus motor vehicles. So there was a confluence of events that led to the creation of our company, Metro Pedal Power, and you know, it's really been a great journey for me to explore running a business and all of the relationships that I've been able to develop and maintain over the years. So, you know, it's what I do and it's what I love.
You know, I just want to say that I sat next to Wenzday for this screening. And when I first met Wenzday, I thought she was really special because of what she was doing and the way she did it. And I have to say that I was very emotional in watching you for the umpteenth time in this film. It was such, you know, a good call that we were able to work together for this film. Just a quick backstory. Wenzday, I met Wenzday, I don't know how many years ago. She was running a tiny storefront on Oxford Street in Cambridge, selling Dutch cargo vehicles, basically, cargo bikes. And I just happened to stop in on a walk by to say hello, because I was curious about those vehicles. As a lifelong bicyclist, I thought that there was great utility. And when I met Wenzday at that place and that time, I just became intrigued that she was had envisioned a new possibility that I wasn't familiar with. And that was the seed of this film. And a couple of years later, Wenzday, I guess you closed the shop and moved down to Union Square. And I met you again. And when I learned about the scale of the operation and some of the details about the day-to-day functions, I began to think that there is a story to be told that would perhaps be used as a model for how we can change and improve our environment, the urban environment in particular, the transportation systems that we have. There's another point, which is that, to me, Wenzday continued to be a model of a visionary breakthrough woman who is just changing the paradigm of what is possible. And so I guess I chased after you to convince you to work with me. And what you saw was the end result on the screen. And Wednesday, just one last point, Wednesday was very patient with me over the course of a couple of years when we're doing this. So that's my start.
Well, I think an extremely moving portion of the film was when you were talking about your parents and the poverty you grew up in, and saying that they were stuck, literally stuck in their situation. Starting a company like this, where there's no roadmap to how to approach this endeavor, can you reveal to us how this idea went from a chalkboard to actually pedals and tires on the road? Like, just at least help us understand how you start a company like this.
Well, I was lucky enough to have people working with me who helped me get off the ground. As Bob mentioned, I had started out working with a guy who was trying to import Dutch bicycles and do this sort of alternative cargo bicycle sales thing, and that actually didn't work out. But when that sort of out of it came Metro Pedal Power, and so I basically got a loan privately and was able to purchase the vehicles. And we had this spark of an idea, and it wasn't difficult at all. We brought them to like a green festival downtown, and there was a lot of interest. And this was at the end of 2007, right, and going into 2008, and then there was, in 2008, this economic crash. And the price of gas in 2008 was really, really high. So as soon as we hit the road, we had a lot of people who were interested. They were seeing gas prices go up, and they were starting to think, like, oh, wait, how much of my lifestyle is like completely dependent on gas being $2 a gallon or $3 a gallon? And they were really starting to imagine that if they are so dependent on these, cheap fuels, that they were going to be really in trouble. So we got actually national news coverage in 2008 and 2009 due to the way the economy was at that time. So, sort of we started, and then there was just like a lot of interest right away, out of luck, really, out of the economy collapsing, right after we started. So that ended up being good for us.
And what sort of reaction? I mean, I can only imagine the comments when a pedal-powered recycling container shows up at that center to make its drop-off, the sort of comments that you might be getting. What are some of the reactions that you're getting from the sort of established recyclers and truckers?
Yeah, I mean, there's we get like, I mentioned this in the movie a little bit. We actually had to prove to the city that we could do the job and that we weren't just some like slacker bicyclists that were gonna that we could actually do real work. We had to do the job for 2 weeks before we even got the contract. We also, in order to go to the recycling facility to drop off, we had to go there and have a meeting with the plant manager and convince them that we were that we understood safety and behavior around large machines and things like that. And so there were some challenges on that front, but most of the time we are, the truckers and stuff see us, and they, like the guy who drives the bulldozer at that recycling plant, always loves us. He just thinks it's cute, And, but also I think likes that there's, that like we're doing something kind of like against the odds, and just going in there and still doing it in kind of a badass way,
Have you had any conversations or been part of the conversation about making streets within Cambridge, Somerville, and the city in general safer and more bike-friendly? The great thing about this film is, look essentially streets that we leave this cinema and walk down. We saw Kendall Square, we saw Union Square. How bike-friendly is the city becoming, and are you having a role in that conversation?
Well, actually, that's one of the ways that Bob and I were connected, is that he was on the board at Mass Bike, and I was on the board at Livable Streets. So we were, even after the first time we met, we were acquainted just through the sort of bicycle advocacy circles. I think that Boston has done a great job of, I now see bike paths on all of these places where I used to ride when there were bike paths. So I like to think that they're paving bike paths behind me, kind of, And, we would be doing what we're doing without bike paths, if, but it's nice that they're doing that. I think education is the main thing, so, I would be pushing for education of motorists in the licensing process, if it were up to me, but the signs on the streets and the lines on the ground that they paint, those are a good start,
And Bob, for you, we had a conversation outside, but tell us a bit about how this film was made, how long it took, what you were shooting with, what were some of the challenges you faced?
Well, the film, I think that we, from start to finish, it probably took really close to 3 years from the very beginning. When you fill out a grant application, you're supposed to say, this is what the film is going to be before you start shooting. And I had no idea how this film was going, what was going to be in it, other than Wenzday. I had no idea what the shape was going to be, what the message was going to be, etc. And I really didn't know until really toward the end of the editing session, which was actually continuous from the beginning. I would shoot, then I would come in and look at the footage and build a scene, and just to get my hands on the material, to understand what the possibilities were for a given day's shoot. And I knew that there was certain basic information that would be useful from Wenzday. I would ask her some questions, but only in the interviews, which came actually late in the process generally. What the technique was typically is Wenzday and I would discuss, well, what are we going to do today? And I would say, Wenzday would suggest, well, I have to pull apart the axle. I'd say, great, let's shoot that. And you saw that scene. And once we agreed to what we were going to do, I really didn't say much. I just let the action happen. And Wenzday always took the lead. And I found throughout the whole process that if I kept my mouth shut, that Wenzday would fill that negative space with all these gems. It's true. And so for me, making this particular film was a real lesson in keeping one's mouth shut and just observing what happens. There has to be, of course, an agreement beforehand about, generally speaking, what you're after, what you're going to do in a given day. But once the day starts, I would just move around and follow whatever Wenzday did. And then maybe, like that scene with the hacksawing, when you were talking about, for example, you didn't realize how things were built. People built buildings, streets, sidewalks. That came out of a complete impromptu. I was just shooting and shooting and shooting as Wenzday was hacksawing away. And then this moment where Wenzday was talking about understanding how the built environment got built, and she took a pipe and a plate of metal and slammed them together. It was a brilliant moment, and who could have predicted that? It was completely impromptu. And luckily, as is usually the case, I just kept my finger on the record button. and follow the action. That is the nature of an observational documentary. Whoever is shooting the camera keeps his or her mouth shut and lets the action happen, and you can never predict what's going to occur, and you just kind of go with the flow. And so in the end, I had all this stuff to work with, and it took a long time to figure out how to put it all together in logical sequences. I took breaks, like I went out to Wisconsin to shoot a film for a friend about this guy who had been labeled crazy. The name of the film is Crazy, actually. And I made a deal with the woman who was producing it, Lisa Zumwalt. I said, look, I'll shoot your film, you come in and consult with me in the editing room. So we had two brains going on for her film and my film, and it was a wonderful collaboration. It wasn't a long collaboration, but long enough so that she helped me think through the sequences. But it's a handmade film. We had, I did everything pretty much, including the grunt jobs like transcribing. But even that was good because if I transcribed, say, an interview that we did, the words that Wenzday or anybody spoke would get burned into my brain, and I'd be able to kind of synthesize from that where what was being said could go with what picture, those kinds of things.
And I'm sure over the course of 3 years, your business has evolved, has changed. Was it interesting seeing the snippets of those years pass in a 30-minute film?
Yeah, I mean, it was like, while we were doing it, it was a little frustrating because things were making it into the film that I felt like that's not really true anymore, or like I don't really think that anymore, or but ultimately, no. I think I think that he did a great job, and I'm so honored to have this document that's. Even though it's a snippet in time, and I feel like I've changed, and the business has evolved, and all new people working there now.
Well, I have one more question, and then we'll open the floor to questions. But your business seems like it is a finely tuned ecosystem, that there are all of these components that work in synergy with the other. Where do you see yourself in 3 years from now? Like, what other elements do you want to introduce?
It's an interesting question. We have, I think all businesses are fragile ecosystems, and there's the balance between the customers and the employees and the mission and the public and the bureaucrats and the market and the economy as a whole. And where we are now, we're in Union Square, which over the past few years has really blown up in terms of interest, and our building is under agreement to be sold, so we're not sure. We only have a lease, so I feel like it's very fragile because the local economy is changing, and the area where it used to be, the reason we got that space is previously was completely undervalued and, sort of run down a little bit. And so it remains to be seen whether the building gets redeveloped or whether we have to move, and that will be a huge blow. So the next year or so is going to really be us navigating that change, new ownership of the building, new zoning, and the city is doing development and all of this stuff. So but we've also added a little bit of, we do some promotional stuff now with a couple of brands and doing sampling and things like that. So we've added a couple of fun things to our work, and we continue to grow.
Is there a nonprofit entity that's part of your business?
We're not a nonprofit. We are an LLC. So we're not under any nonprofit umbrella. So.
But is there maybe the possibility of a nonprofit entity that is paired with your business, that people who don't necessarily get food from CSAs or have businesses that need delivery can still donate directly to your cause?
I think Power to the Pedals is a nonprofit, the film.
Yes.
Yeah, so.
That's good.
So that there has to be a vision and a viable idea, which I do think that we have a model that's been proven at this point. And we went through a couple of hard years actually. While this film was being made, was 2011, 12, which 2010 and 11 were actually really difficult years for us financially, and we ended up, partially thanks to the recycling contract we got with the city, getting in the black and, paying back some of our debts, and now we are like completely debt-free, and we have a profitable business. So it's other than the fragility of the real estate that's happening in Somerville and Boston in general, I'm not really sure if we can find a space that we can afford. But other than that, I feel like we're at a really good springboard to either replicate in other places or to or even replicating within Boston. I mean, if we had a hub in Roxbury or in, we don't really serve Dorchester and JP and those areas because it's just too far from Somerville. So we were thinking about some different models that we can explore both within Boston and also in other cities.
May I just add one point? You mentioned the person in the back who just asked the question. You mentioned inner city weightlifting. And it turns out that inner city weightlifting is an organization where people who had been in prison get out, work out, learn to train others. And so inner city weightlifting's business model is to use those former people who were formerly incarcerated as trainers for businesses. And they are located in Kendall Square, in the heart of a thriving research industrial lab place. And these guys have had radically different life experiences than the people around them, and yet they bond and they create new lives for themselves and for others. It's a fabulous organization.
Well, Bob, we'll be looking forward to your new film. And Wenzday, no matter what happens with your location, you've gained my respect, and I'm sure that you're going to be able to resolve whatever is put in your way. I just have such admiration for you. Thank you. Thank you.